Hello, world cultural students. So this video is going to talk about Buddhism, China, and Japan history in preparation for our Unit 9 COA over East and Southeast Asia that we should be taking tomorrow for Tuesday. Now, getting into the actual first topic, Buddhism. So if you didn't already know, and a lot of y'all probably already know this, if you chose Buddhism for your religion project, that was due like last week, Buddhism was created in the 6th century BC in northeast India. The founder or the creator of Buddhism was known as Siddhartha Gautama, who eventually became known as the Buddha once he became enlightened. Siddhartha was a prince to, I believe it was the Shakya clan in ancient India. He wanted to find the truth of life and death. He realized that life was full of suffering, and he wanted to sort of wander and meditate or wander off from the palace that he was raised in. He wanted to go off and meditate for, I think, like 6 or 7 years, wandered the earth, and eventually sat down underneath a tree, was deep in meditation and deep in thought, and eventually became enlightened, and he reached this state of thought, of spiritual being known as nirvana to the Buddhists, which is kind of like sort of like a spiritual awakening in a sense. And Buddhism itself is based on 4 noble truths, or sort of like 4 basic beliefs. The first belief is going to be existence is suffering, known as dukkha. Hopefully I'm not butchering these pronunciations. The second belief is suffering has a cause, which is craving/attachment, as in you want things. This is known as samudaya. 3 is there is an end to the suffering, nirvana. And then last but not least, the 4th noble truth is that there is a path that leads to this end of this suffering, this path to nirvana. And it's known as the Eightfold Path. Eightfold path being right view, right resolve, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And this 4th noble truth is known as Magga. So basically this 4th truth here is basically what you would be doing as a practitioner of Buddhism. And then, as we talked about in class, Buddhism eventually did spread from India, because remember it originated in India from Siddhartha. It eventually spread from India to the rest of Asia around the 3rd century BC. Okay, and as you can see on this map, let me see if I can move my image here. So Buddhism started around the area of northeast India and eventually spread over several hundred years, 1,000 years, all across Asia, especially like into the areas of China, as we talked about in class, into the Koreas and Japan, and even into like Southeast Asia, such as through like Cambodia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, all the way into areas like Malaysia and Indonesia. Okay, so that was Buddhism we talked about in class, and now getting into the next topic, which is Chinese dynasty. So kind of like a really quick take on the Chinese history that we've discussed in the past couple of weeks. So remember that ancient China was ruled by dynasties or ruling families, starting with the Shang dynasty around 1600 BC, all the way up until the end of the Qin dynasty, and that's Qing, it's pronounced Qin in the Chinese language, the Qin dynasty in 1912 AD, so give or take about 3,500 years. And again, the Shang dynasty was the first Chinese dynasty, and then the Qin dynasty was going to be the last dynasty. I think some historians believe that there's actually a dynasty that came before the Shang. It was like the Jin dynasty, but at least according to this chart here that I have on the screen, it would be the Shang dynasty as being the actual first one, at least according to the first records of ancient China. So the Chinese of antiquity created a whole lot of groundbreaking inventions that we still use today. And this is in our reading like a couple weeks ago. And those 4 big inventions that we focused on were papermaking, as in the papermaking process, the magnetic compass, the actual invention of gunpowder, completely changed the game for like military tactics, as well as things like fireworks, and then woodblock printing, which is kind of like an early form of the sort of art that you're probably familiar with nowadays, where like you actually kind of like the printing press. But way back when the Chinese or the ancient Chinese invented woodblock printing, where you take like ink and you put it on some sort of like, I guess like some sort of like stamp, and you push it onto a piece of wood, and it creates this really awesome like artwork. And so a lot of ancient Chinese artwork prints are actually made from this process that the ancient Chinese came up with, woodblock printing. And then over here, let me go ahead and move my image again, are going to be, again, the Chinese dynasties. The Shang dynasty being the first, and then the Qin dynasty being the last dynasty up until the creation of modern China. And all the dynasties in between would be the Zhao dynasty, the Springs and Falls period. So not really a dynasty, but more so like a period of in ancient China, the Warring States period, I think that's Qin dynasty, maybe it is also pronounced Qin. Then the Han dynasty, 3 kingdoms, the Sui dynasty, the Tang dynasty, the 5 dynasties and the 10 kingdoms, the Song dynasty, the Yuan dynasty, and then finally the Ming dynasty. And a lot of these inventions here taking place or being invented around the time of, I believe, the Han dynasty. So around the time period is going to be a lot, or rather the time period when there's sort of like a cultural or technological advancement in ancient China. So a lot of those inventions that are here were invented around this time period in China, around the Han dynasty, at least according to our reading. All right, and then finally, Japan's feudalism. Okay, so a lot like China, ancient Japan used to be ruled by emperors. However, these emperors did begin to lose power over time. They lost a lot of their power and their influence. And as a result, a lot of these noble, very rich landowning families in Japan eventually set up what is known as a feudal system or feudalism, which is just a system where landholders provide land to tenants or occupants, people living on the land, in exchange for those tenants' loyalty and service to those noble landowning families. And we did touch on feudalism back in our Europe unit as well, with like the knights. So kind of getting into Japanese feudalism. So basically what it is, the sort of breakdown is that high nobles, very rich families would own a lot of land, and they would give that land or gift that land to lesser nobles. So people who were still decently rich, but not quite as rich as the higher noble families. The higher nobles would give this land to the lesser nobles for the lesser nobles' loyalty and military service. And this is where we get like the samurai families. And then kind of going down the social ladder here, peasants or, the poor people would farm the nobles' estates. So both the lesser nobles, like the samurai families, and the higher nobles' estates in exchange for the protection of those peasants as well. So it's kind of like this sort of a circle of life thing going on here, where the richer families would be the ones providing the land and resources. And then the sort of like middle, lesser nobles would be like, like protection, like the samurai, they'd be the ones doing like the protecting. And then the very bottom of the ladder would be the ones, actually farming, tilling the land, to produce a lot of the crops and harvest for feudal Japan. Now, out of the system of feudalism eventually came a very powerful, I believe they actually originally started off as samurais, but they eventually became military leaders themselves, and they were known as the shogun. And the shogun were the ones who held the real power in Japan, or feudal Japan, not really the emperors. Okay, so the emperors were still around. They still had a certain sort of authority, but they just didn't really have as much power as the very influential shoguns at the time. So again, the shoguns were the ones who held the real power in feudal Japan, and they were essentially like military leaders. And then the landowning warriors who supported the shogun were known as the samurai. Okay, and I don't think we really touched upon it in our lesson reading in ancient Japan, but the samurai served not just the shogun, but also the heads of the landowning rich noble families known as the daimyo. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and wrap up this review video. I wish you all the best of luck on tomorrow's UA. And if you have any questions or concerns about maybe something you want to go ahead and touch base on a little bit more in depth in preparation for the test tomorrow, go ahead and message your teacher or ask questions because we're here to help you. Okay, so I'll see you all next time and take care.